With version 2.0 just under a week away, along with the recent livestream covering everything to expect from Renacita, I'm sure everyone is hyped for the new update, and especially for our brand new characters Carlotta and Roccia. Now with Roccia specifically, she will be dropping in the second phase and is expected to be a top tier character possessing a few unique traits and skills, given she is a 2.0 character and will likely stand out from our current character roster. More notably, Roccia is a sub DPS tailored to be the best in slot for Camellia. But even with that being said, is Roccia really a must summon for Camellia, and how much better is she than the current best in slot Sanhua? Fortunately enough, with the early gameplay showcase of Roccia from IGN, we can essentially see what Roccia's kit is capable of, how flexible and team building Roccia would be as a result, the overall value she holds against Sanhua as Camellia's sub DPS, and ultimately, if Roccia holds enough value to be considered as essential for Camellia. Just before we jump into it, as always, would really appreciate it if you could subscribe for more WutheringWaves content and drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Now I'm gonna kick this off with going over everything we know regarding Roccia's kit. As mentioned, Roccia is a sub DPS character that is designed to be the best in slot for Camellia. So with that being said, we could assume that Roccia's outro skill provides a 20% havoc damage amplification and 25% basic attack damage amplification, since those are the specific stats that will directly influence Camellia's DPS. However, taking a look at Roccia's early gameplay showcase, it seems like her outro skill provides an additional ability to the character switching in. Along with receiving a boost in basic attack damage and havoc damage, an exclusive gadget is provided to the character, and on activation it will cast a tornado that is capable of crowd controlling enemies. Although the tornado doesn't really last that long and is on the smaller side in comparison to Roccia's skill. But given the outro does already provide a massive boost in damage and the fact that you can control when to deploy the tornado, Roccia's outro skill is objectively then the most valuable outro skill out of every other sub DPS character in the game. Additionally, more or less any DPS character would benefit from crowd controlling enemies, as they would be able to deal damage and clear more efficiently. So the outro skill really is stacked with value and is a major aspect of Roccia's kit. Now another integral aspect of Roccia's kit will definitely be her resonance skill, since it is her main tornado ability that pulls enemies together and is much larger than the outro skill variation. Also, the resonance skill has a cooldown of 10 seconds, which is pretty good considering it will ensure you can always pop it whenever you do switch back to Roccia. In addition to crowd controlling enemies, Roccia is capable of dealing plunge attacks when she is shot up into the air and can deal significant amounts of havoc damage. The plunge attacks are in fact linked to Roccia's forte gauge, which is comprised of 3 separate bars. Each bar represents one plunge attack that Roccia can deal just after activating their resonance skill. As you can imagine, the forte gauge is filled with Roccia dealing basic attacks, and the resonance skill in particular will fill 1 bar on the gauge, ensuring you can at least cast 1 plunge attack when you do pop the resonance skill. However, there is one more ability that can fill Roccia's forte gauge and can enable her to deal plunge attacks, which would be Roccia's charged heavy attack. So Roccia can deal her great damage dealing plunge attacks through both the resonance skill and charged heavy attack, which is nice as it will lead to some versatility in her rotations. Specifically with the charged attack providing forte stacks, it isn't really clear how much energy the attack can provide, since it did provide more than 1 forte stack in the showcase. So whether it gives an exact amount or you can charge potentially 2 or 3 forte stacks will be something we would need to wait to see. Lastly, as for the ultimate, as stacked as Roccia's kit is, the Liberation kinda provides nothing at face value aside from dealing some damage. Which is fine if that is the case, as the rest of the kit, as I just mentioned, is stacked with utility. Overall, Roccia certainly looks like an amazing sub DPS and just looks fun to play with, given she can crowd control through multiple abilities and deal considerable damage through her plunge attacks. To top it off, Roccia is able to accumulate concerto energy quite quickly, as the skill and plunge attack combo provides a solid amount by themselves, which is definitely a huge bonus as it will allow Roccia to pull off rapid rotations to achieve quicker clear times. Moving on to Roccia's team flexibility, of course she will be the best in slot for Camellia due to the outro skill being designed for her, but it doesn't mean you can only utilize Roccia alongside Camellia. It isn't exactly confirmed, but if the outro skill is capable of providing a havoc damage amplification and basic attack damage amplification, then every character that specializes in dealing basic attack damage would synergize well with Roccia, as they would at least benefit from a 25% basic attack damage amplification. So similar to how Jinchi utilizes half of Zhezhi's outro skill that provides a resonant skill damage amplification, it means the havoc damage boost from Roccia doesn't necessarily need to be utilized. Therefore, characters such as Encore and Lumi in particular, they do in fact deal basic attack damage through multiple abilities within their kits. So if you are a fan of Encore and Lumi and do utilize them as one of your main DPS characters, then you could definitely use Roccia alongside them if you wanted an alternative to Sanhua. Now another character that would benefit even more than Encore and Lumi, to no surprise, would be Havoc Rover, due to the fact they are Havoc type and do deal quite a lot of basic attacks when utilized as a main DPS. In addition, Roccia's crowd controlling abilities would be quite valuable for Havoc Rover, considering there are times that Havoc Rover's liberation doesn't hit all enemies on the field. So especially with the fact that Rover's liberation does deal a ton of damage, you would certainly want to ensure you do hit everyone, which Roccia's crowd controlling abilities will pretty much enable. So not only will Havoc Rover be able to utilize Roccia's entire outro skill, but would benefit significantly due to Roccia pulling enemies together herself, and with the Pocket Tornado Rover can deploy at will. Lastly, given Roccia can buff Havoc damage through the outro skill, it would certainly mean that Jin can also synergize with Roccia. Although Jin would be better off with someone that can buff resonant skill damage, a boost in havoc damage and enemies being pulled together for Jin to take down more efficiently would be extremely valuable for Jin, and so would allow for there to be some great synergy between her and Roccia. Now aside from the more obvious synergies, purely due to the fact that Roccia can accumulate Calcharo energy at a good rate, crowd control enemies and deal considerable damage, she would likely then be a solid sub DPS for nearly any main DPS character. Of course, I would recommend to utilize a sub DPS that can provide valuable buffs to the main DPS character, but if you aren't able to as you simply don't have the preferred sub DPS, then Roccia could be a great alternative to play in the sub DPS position. So with that, Roccia is pretty flexible in team building and can definitely be utilized outside of Camellia teams. But of course she would specialize in supporting Havoc characters that mostly deal basic attack damage just like Camellia. Now as for Roccia beside Camellia, it is clearly shown within the early gameplay showcase that they will synergize very well together. But there is also Camellia's current best in slot sub DPS Sanhua as an option. So with Roccia and Sanhua head to head, Roccia does have a much more valuable outro skill since she not only provides a boost in havoc damage and basic attack damage, but will also provide a pocket tornado for Camellia. Whereas Sanhua's outro skill will only provide a 38% basic attack damage amplification. Although if you do have Sanhua at E6, which I expect most players would have by now, she does provide an additional 20% attack bonus after detonating ice glaciers. So in terms of providing a damage boost to Camellia, it's not as if Roccia is clear from Sanhua, as both do provide a significant boost in damage. Regarding Sanhua and Roccia's individual rotations, it might be a bit early to provide a final judgment as the gameplay of Roccia wasn't the most optimal, but from what we've seen so far, Sanhua might just be quicker than Roccia. Though with that said, Roccia's method of accumulating huge amounts of Calcharo energy would be pulling enemies together and plunging down on them, whereas Sanhua's would be to hit your QTEs on the Forte gauge. So if you aren't really a fan of Sanhua's QTE abilities in specific, then Roccia would be the better and more comfortable option to utilize alongside Camellia. As for both Roccia and Sanhua's liberations, they do only deal damage with no other effects, unless it is disclosed later on that Roccia's is capable of providing more than just damage. But as of now, the liberations do hold the same amount of value. Now just based off their kits, I would say Roccia is more of a comfortable character to utilize and can provide stronger buffs to Camellia through the outro skill, whereas Sanhua will likely still be quicker to activate the outro skill and to allow Camellia back onto the field. Additionally, if your Camellia is already capable of dealing massive amounts of DPS, then the difference between the buffs Roccia and Sanhua can each provide might not be that significant. Lastly, just disregarding the kits for a moment, Sanhua is a free character and is specifically a one-handed sword character, which means every player does have Sanhua on their account and likely has access to a 5-star weapon being the Emerald of Genesis. On the other hand, for Roccia, you would of course have to summon for her and would need to pull for her signature weapon, since there aren't many solid 5-star gauntlets available to use as an alternative. So as much as I have been focusing mainly on the actual performance of both Roccia and Sanhua, the cost to utilize them would be something to certainly also consider for every player. Overall, Roccia has exceeded expectations with her kit being stacked with a lot of utility, and just as I mentioned, she does introduce a completely new ability within her kit, which would be to provide the character switching in with a pocket tornado in their gadget slot. So perhaps we can expect many more characters in the future to possibly provide other abilities in the form of a gadget. As for Roccia more specifically, and whether she would be considered as essential for Camellia, ultimately Roccia just provides more comfort overall, and considering Sanhua is currently the best sub DPS for Camellia, it means you can skip Roccia if crowd controlling and an overall higher damage boost to Camellia doesn't seem appealing enough. That being said, Roccia definitely looks much more fun to play with than Sanhua and will enable Camellia to hit enemies harder than ever. So if you are looking to maximize the amount of damage your Camellia can deal as much as possible, then Roccia would of course be a character you should look to pick up. In addition, Roccia will only extend Camellia's longevity even further, which is a massive bonus for players that do enjoy playing with Camellia and would want to play with her for a while. So all in all, Roccia wouldn't be considered as essential for Camellia, but will make Camellia's team better overall, and so if you can afford to summon for her and a signature weapon, then you should certainly consider pulling for Roccia. Lastly, similar to Zhezhi and Yinlin, Roccia's outro skill will enable her to hold a lot of longevity, considering there will definitely be more characters that drop that can utilize her outro skill. So even if you do pick up Roccia and don't have Camellia, it's more or less guaranteed that there will be new characters later on that would have Roccia as their best in slot, which means either way she would be a great long-term investment for your account. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Would really appreciate it if you could subscribe for more WutheringWaves content, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like. Also, drop a comment down below on whether you will be pulling Roccia for Camellia or will you be skipping. And yeah, hope to catch you guys later.